Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is emerging as a top contender for the 2024 Republican nomination. That's if former President Trump doesn't run. In a straw poll of Conservative Political Action Conference attendees this weekend, the governor came in a distant second behind Mr. Trump. But when the former president was not on the hypothetical primary ballot, DeSantis was the clear favorite. The Florida Republican gained prominence as a staunch supporter of former President Trump. The governor has said he's focused on his re-election campaign next year, but people who work closely with him reportedly say he's eyeing the White House. For more on Governor DeSantis' future, I want to bring in Florida politics reporter A.G. Gancarski. He joins me now from Avondale, Florida. A.G., welcome. Thanks very much for joining us. So as a congressman, Ron DeSantis' relationship with former President Trump seemed to help advance his political career. What is that relationship like now?
Well, it's still a good relationship, depending on who you ask. The governor and the president both say it's great. However, with DeSantis making political inroads, a lot of 2024 talk, there have been constant reminders from President Trump, such as, well, if I run again, he'd make a good vice president, but so would other people. And when he's at 3% of the polls, I endorsed him. He went up like a rocket ship and things like that. So as only the former president can do, he reminds Ron DeSantis that he's basically an adjunct to Donald Trump.
Yes, as only he can do, as you say. Well, Sunday's CPAC straw poll showed former President Trump at 70% and Governor DeSantis at 21%. Yet if President Trump is not in the contest, DeSantis' number jumps to 68%. What do we actually know about the Florida governor's future political plans?
Well, DeSantis is consistent. He says that he's only looking at 2022, saying that he's got a tough re-election ahead. There's a couple of Democrats vying right now for that nomination. But he's traveling across the country, not so much in the last couple of weeks, but he's been going, here and there, Pennsylvania and other places, for meetings, for fundraisers and so on. His political committee is doing really well also. Friends of Ron DeSantis, a lot of small dollar donations from across the country. Ron DeSantis is a first-tier Republican politician for the 2024 nomination. The problem is 2021, as we know, what looks good 3 years out doesn't necessarily translate when it gets to the primaries and caucuses. Until Donald Trump makes a decision, he's frozen. Ron DeSantis basically can't do much until Donald Trump decides. Donald Trump is basically looking like he's running in 2024. He's giving no indication he's going to do otherwise. The thing is, Trump's getting older, et cetera, but he is still the leader of the party, and Ron DeSantis would admit that if you asked him. Unless Donald Trump is incapacitated or sidelined, it's his party. That said, Ron DeSantis is doing what it takes if there's an opening in 2024. He's making the rounds nationally and all of that, but he's also a target. Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, she is basically targeting him in speeches, talking about how he had a lockdown, closed the beaches, and so on. So there will be that purity test among the base, regardless. So Ron DeSantis has a two-front war right now. One is with Donald Trump and what he does, and the other one is with these other people who see him as a front runner if Trump's not in the race.
So it's interesting then, how has Governor DeSantis differentiated himself from former President Trump, and how has that impacted his political standing?
He hasn't really differentiated himself that much, except in certain policy moves. The collaboration with Joe Biden over the Surfside thing, that was something that nobody really expected going in. People wondered how DeSantis and Trump would work together, or DeSantis and Biden, rather, and it turned out they worked together really well. And since Surfside, DeSantis has really dialed down his rhetoric. The thing is, to appeal to the Republican base, you have to step up that rhetoric. You have to talk about things like critical race theory. You have to talk about things like socialist Joe Biden. You basically have to play to the base. And right now, DeSantis can't do that because, A, of the Surfside tragedy, and B, hurricane season's coming back. And, every Florida governor knows that he's going to need FEMA at some point during hurricane season. So Ron DeSantis is locked in. The rhetoric he would like to use politically, he can't use because he's in a governing position.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about some really interesting factors coming together. And as you noted before, Governor DeSantis and other Republicans whose names have emerged as potential 2024 contenders have to strike this really delicate balance. They cannot alienate Trump supporters, but they also have to start mobilizing their resources if they want to run. Can you talk a bit more, AG, about how Governor DeSantis has walked that line?
He has done some heavy Republican fundraising appeals, a lot of small dollar donations. He had a $17 million month the other month. It's cooled down a bit since. But really, it's him and Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who's also fundraising really prodigiously. Those guys are in a class of their own. And, that's really what you're going to be looking at. You're going to look at DeSantis versus Greg Abbott and who's doing the fundraising there. You're going to also have to look at the Trump children, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, so on. But somebody like Kristi Noem or somebody that can throw pot shots from DeSantis is right. That's what the governor has to watch out for, because, what is current in 2021 may not be the thing in 2022. And, I'm interested in seeing how Governor DeSantis re-engages the base in the upcoming months, because he's going to have to, otherwise it becomes old news.
Well, while we have you, AG, I'd also like to get your thoughts on the protests happening in Cuba. Florida is, of course, home to a large Cuban-American community. How could Cuba's protests impact Florida, politically speaking?
Well, Republicans are taking the position that we need more intervention. We need more explicit intervention. They see Cuba and Venezuela linked with the Chinese and Russian issues. So they see it's part of a bigger Cold War. Joe Biden is being pressured by every major Florida Republican to do more. The president's made statements in writing and in person, but people are looking for renewed sanctions. And Rick Scott and Marco Rubio have actually been out front on this. Rick Scott has called for a renewal of sanctions, and he has said that we can't have the Obama-Biden appeasement policies come back regarding Cuba. Marco Rubio is basically a 24/7 news source on what's happening with the dissidents in Havana and other cities. So this issue is going to resonate into the midterms because it comes down to that anti-communist, pro-American thing that right now is very much top of the mind among Florida Republicans.
Very much top of mind. All right, AG Gancarski. AG, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.